this is a series that I started after I came to Rutgers, now almost 9 months ago. Chancellor's Colloquium. The whole idea is, in an institution like Rutgers, we have excellence across disciplines. Truly, good institutions are institutions that have spires of excellence in a few areas. That's what they're known for. Rutgers, I believe, is way beyond that. It has excellence across disciplines: science, arts, humanities, engineering, business. It truly is a great institution in that regard. So what we wanted to do in this Chancellor's Colloquia is to bring together faculty members from diverse disciplines to hear about each other's work. We all talk about the importance of interdisciplinary work. Well, how does it really happen? There isn't much scheduled interdisciplinarity. It always happens in seminars like this where, okay, so let me see. Are there folks from sciences here? All right, thank you. Is there anybody from engineering here? Yeah, so you don't count. But yeah, I'm an engineer too, so there are two of us from the Chancellor's office. But the reason why I'm asking is, it is important. It is important. I know people are busy. It's the middle of the semester. Folks are, doing grant proposal, this, that, and the other. But to take time off an hour or so to attend lectures in areas that we don't know anything about is where the interesting, the intellectual curiosity, as we call it, gets sparked, and collaborations happen. So that is what we hope these seminars will do for the campus as a whole. But there is another purpose, and that purpose is more fundamental to the institution. A public research university gets a significant amount of its funding from the taxpayers of New Jersey. So we should ask ourselves, almost on a daily basis, each of us, no matter what we do, why do we do what we do, and why should anybody care? When we talk about own research, why do we do the research that we do? It is important for our own intellectual progression to be asking that question day in and day out. And then, equally important, and in this day and age I would say even more important, why should the public care about what we do? Why should they fund us, a public research university, with taxpayer dollars? Right? So as we think about the series, we must be keeping this in mind, and we need to convey the work, the intellectual basis of the work, the impact of the work. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we are always into curing cancer, as important as that is. Visual and performing arts, the humanities, is in many ways the essence of the liberal arts university. The preparation of the mind, as it were, is what education is all about. Although, in this day and age, a job after graduation is important, but let us not forget the liberal education that the US institutions are so well known for is for that preparation of the mind, habits of the mind, you call it whatever you will, but the education of the whole, right? So my hope also is through these seminars in a geographically dispersed campus, we hope to bring people together around topics of interest and then spark new collaborations, spark new interdisciplinary areas, and move the frontier of whichever discipline forward. So this year, we have heard from a philosopher who told us how to make tough decisions. We heard from a political scientist who explained to us the world of political spin. And most recently, we heard from a climate scientist who explained to us how important global climate change is and how we measure it, what impact it has on the earth and our world in general. So this afternoon we have with us a visual artist, or as she calls herself, an amoeba artist. Amoeba artist, right?
Yeah.
Assistant Professor Aki Sasamoto is from the Mason Grove School of the Arts. She works in many mediums, sculpture, dance, and performance, to communicate the meaning of complex ideas. Just this afternoon, as I was speaking with her, I heard she actually came to the US to do mathematics. And then, because the parties in math departments were not what they were claimed to be, she moved on to the more interesting visual and performing arts. But honestly, it's a very important thing that the complexity in art and the complexity in mathematics, in music, there is something very intrinsic and transcends all of these areas, which we are trying to grasp. She is a collaborator and has worked with mathematicians, musicians, with physicists, writers, and scholars from various walks of life. She has achieved wide recognition for her sculpture, her video, and sound to transform ordinary moments into theatrical performances. She has been featured in the New York Times, the New Yorker, and many other publications. She has lectured all over the world, from Iceland to New Zealand, and closer in Princeton and Yale as well. She received her Bachelor of Arts from Wesleyan University and then an MFA from Columbia University. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Aki Sasamoto. Please.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And I called this talk, and I call myself Amoeba Artist, because I think amoeba is so cool. And it's only single cell, and then they have this pseudopod, and for some reason they could bring part of their body, warp it across the campus or across the country, and then your arm could actually be another country if you're amoeba. So that's like, for me, a model of an artist. Artist could have two things, right? One is your hands. So you have to make something, and that involves very claustrophobic, deep investigation. But your head could go anywhere. So in a way, talking about interdisciplinarity, the topic of the piece or topic of my project can be virtually in any field. So amoeba is my model. And another thing I wanted to preface is no. So I'll just show a few, maybe last few projects I have, and I can show both what went on in the head part, the everywhere part, and then what happened behind in the making process, and then afterwards maybe I have some thoughts. The thing you're seeing right now is a video that was part of the installation. And the installation this was the most recent piece I had. Just a sec. Called Yield Point. I don't know if you can take down the light a bit. Great, thank you. Yield point is, I think some of the engineer would know what this is about. Yield point is a point in which the material being pulled apart could reach a disproportionately into a plastic phase. So usually, I have this hair tie I usually use. Usually things will stretch but go back to its own normal stage. That's elastic stage. And I think most people are like that too. You know, you might get sick sometimes, so you take a rest and then recuperate, right? And then you sometimes, like before deadline, journalists will be writing 2 nights without sleeping. So I was trying to put this metaphor of stretchability of material to human or any other objects. But the reality is, even though a metal that I was pulling there, even though a bridge that you think is pretty strong, they stretch and contract with weather, right? But at some point, it leaves this elastic state of going back to the normal place, and then it goes into this plastic phase that it doesn't even go back. So this is, this is pretty good stage. But when you have an old underwear and elastic is, has this funny shape, and it doesn't go back, it's this wavy thing. But in fact, you want that underwear. You don't want the new one. You actually like that weird comfort that soft pajama or underwear gives. So I was trying to advocate for that phase of object that doesn't go back, that it's not new, and perhaps that is the creative stage. If you're gonna use that same metaphor and put it, it's not the elastic stage that's interesting. It's actually past the yield point when material is not behaving proportionally. So this elasticity is measured by stress over strain, right? But usually you give this, when I pulled those things, show some of the material here. Oh, I'm not good at this. Okay. When I talked to Professor Lehman, a material engineer. This is a MTS machine that pulls. I think engineer here have to do it on a 101. So basically what I did is I talked to him and then, so here you go. So ask him if I can use the machine to pull it. And I don't know, it goes back to, it's really, I'm gonna jump around and talk like who I am. In the past, I went to this girls-only school when I was teenage, and then next door was this boys-only school in Japan. This was in Japan, and they had this machine in their school. And then in April, because it's a pretty 101 thing to do, they pulled this metal, and I heard like bang, like a crazy sound. Like only in a certain weeks in April, I heard people breaking these metal rods. So I wanted to do it. So when I came to Rutgers, and then I was just trying to harass every other department, and then I talked to Professor Lehman. I just want to pull this steel or something, and then he let me use it. And afterwards, I got hooked, and I was there all the time. And then I started to for this piece, I pulled this float rod, which is the one that's used for toilet. And I pulled the float rod apart using this machine. And this is the graph if you flex things, meaning things are being pushed to test at what point it doesn't go back. And this is the me pulling steel. So at some point it's always proportional, but at some point it starts to veer, and then you pass this yield point and you never go back to the original shape. But what happens is at the end, when you pull, it gets destroyed, right? That's like after the maximum maximum strength. When you put that amount, things break, and then not only it doesn't go back, it's the end. So then I was thinking, every time I see graph, I feel very emotional and think about how can I experience it, because and I always failed in some exam because I start to get so empathetic to the graph itself. And then can I actually stay in this creative phase that I call, that doesn't go back, but it creates this really comfortable underwear elastic effect, but not actually destroy. Can I just stay in that amazing 3 months? And so I was trying to combine this graph of stretching and also flexing, because flexing means it keeps looping. Can I stay in that area? So that was my question, somehow developed, and I realized that's what I wanted to do. So what I end up doing is to make this film first, and then also started to link with some of the other thing I was working on at the time. So I'm going to start from maybe I'll show you first what the end piece looked like. The end piece did look like an installation where there was a dumpster, and inside is a trampoline that I sewed up and put it inside. And then there's another dumpster that was cut in half, so it stretched apart with wire and elastic being stretched away from each other. And you can see that red line is that when it's turned dark, you can really see the stretched line between the two things. There was other things in the installation. There was garbage bags everywhere. This recycling bag on the wall was held by static energy, and static energy only. So I pull out, and then I had to go like that, and it was staying there. And at some point, when it gives out, because of humidity or whatever, somebody passed by too quickly, it will fall. But and then there's also a garbage can that once in a while blow up. And then there goes the video that I was shooting. It was a steel dumpster, is made of steel, and there's also brass. I was working with saxophonist when I was performing in the installation, so there was some elements. And when I perform, I would lecture about yield point, and then I call it deform here. So once past the yield limit, it starts to deform, and I was comparing that with a toothpaste. You know, when you towards the end of the toothpaste, and you wanted to buy toothpaste actually 2 weeks ago, but it's amazing what kind of stretch you can get past the 2 weeks, right? and then you start to be creative. So this is what creativity I'm talking about. Then you do all sorts of things. I sometimes use cut out chopsticks with rubber band, or the spiral methods, and but towards the end, what you don't want to do is the death, which is scissors get introduced, and then no more. You dig toothbrush or whatever. So I was trying to figure out how to stay and how to keep flexing between the maximum tensile strength and the yield point. And to do that, I wanted to actually flex myself between the death and life. So I jumped into the trampoline to actually fluctuate between the garbage and non-garbage, poking a head in and out. So that's part of performance. It's too dark for here to see. Anyway, then I start talking about flexing around here. I always think about this, the dreams I had. I really like sneaking into science class, but dreaming about superimposing graphs because they don't do it, right? Because you're separating the problem, so it becomes about one single result and goal you want to have. But what I want to do is something wrong thing to do, is to superimpose two different experiments, and if there's some kind of image or concept that emerges. So that's the area that I was talking about. And I would like to now show you what went behind. I always, whenever I try to talk about different talk, like what exactly was the initial inspiration, it's really hard to tell. But the trampoline thing and then the fluctuation between the death and life thing came from a piece before. I was invited to South India in Kochi to do a site-specific installation there. And Kochi, the place that I was given was right by the beach, and it was exactly 0 point, right? It was the horizon, and I wanted to experience the horizon, because horizon is something like a mountain. You can't touch. You have to. You cannot see. You can kind of see from far, but you can't touch. And I wanted to touch because I want to do the play with fire or play with wrong thing. So what I did was, this was a sea level building. So I dig a hole and I put the trampoline inside. So that's the beginning of the trampoline. And I excavated one of the furniture pieces I found there, and I jumped in and out. To make this, I had to work with engineer because it was sea level, the things were, water will start coming in, so I had to come up with a good way to do it. Nobody has done this, so it was a pretty involved thing. And I ended up performing, and I started to, when I improvised, it was just, okay, I'll just do something, and I started to draw the graph of elasticity out of nowhere. Probably came from my elementary school science class or something. So that's how the whole thing started. This is how I excavated it. I digged a hole with the help of the engineer I was working with, and I got an idea to sink in the tube. Meanwhile, so it just, as I excavate inside, it just goes down in there, and then we had to get the pump water out. So that was the piece that I was working. Around the same time, I was shooting the video. Okay, this I already showed. And then, when I was shooting the video and I realized I still want to do this fluctuating on the horizon, I suggested to the kitchen, there was a second floor gallery space, hey, can I actually move to the ground floor and then punch a hole? And New York City had a lot of problem with me. I had a commission that I had to turn down because the city didn't want me to dig a hole. So I was looking for other kind of hole, and in the end it became appropriate to think about refuse or garbage as a kind of death of material, because I wanted to make a equal with life and object life. then I was looking around all sorts of dumpsters, and I came across to this dumpster guy who told me there is a manufacturer of this. So I was calling all sorts of manufacturer, and then I found this place who was making this particular dumpster that would be a good height for me. And I went to the factory, and it was so beautiful. It's almost like I don't know, it was already like a German museum, industrial, like there was a museum of it. And it's like, I fell in love with this place. I was spending a lot of time, and they didn't let me go inside, but I was eyeing on it. So I ended up making a deal, and I got this one. So what I ended up doing is I had to cut it open, and I had to weld the trampoline support. So what I ended up doing is to secure the cutting line like that, and then I think there was actual cutting. Then I end up cutting it, and this started to make me inspired. By cutting this, I wanted to shoot. Originally, I only shot this pulling the rod. But I realized there is another kind of experiment I had to do, which was flexing. And the reason why is when I was cutting the dumpster, once the metal flex, it doesn't go back. So the dent will never go back, right? Like the paper, when you have a crease, it doesn't go back to the really nice stage, initial stage. So I had to reinforce everything so that I just cut between these two bars. There was 3 washers, and I just cut through the washer. That's how you make it so that it doesn't flex. So when it comes back, those two cut dumpster comes back together, it becomes a whole again. Because I wanted to talk about not dying, not committing suicide. I needed to really make the clean cut. And then by doing that, I realized I actually have to talk about flexing as well. So instead of just the initial desire of like doing the pulling of a steel that only boys were doing, like I was actually wanting to talk about flexing as well. So that's how things roll in like making of these art stuff. And okay, not good explaining that. Okay. And then, I went in there to reshoot it. But you can imagine that lab was like not ready for the photo shoot, so I had to like cover everything and bring in like a crazy expensive lighting. So that's how I end up doing this piece. I guess what I can talk about is I wanted to say at the beginning was I guess it was last year that Harvard introduced this Octopus Machine. Do you know? They introduced a new robot. It moves like octopus. And what's exciting about this is usually AI, right, artificial intelligence, is about you have a goal how to move arm. So you try to simulate the arm movements, and then you make those orders. So human was making a command for an object to do certain things. But exciting thing about this soft robot is they didn't use any metal. So what it means is it was a flesh-like soft material, and they put the electricity through it. So it was moving like a tentacle. It was moving like this. And this is unlikely for scientist way of doing it. Because what kind of command would you put? Because you usually have a behavior you want to achieve first, and then you make a command, right? But instead, you put in the electricity and see how it moves. And that was very much the way that I think the art does stuff. So you look at the behavior and then you see the life. So there is like an area of study that I work with often is called artificial life instead of artificial intelligence, right? And it's the big difference is to find life in this, or find life pattern in how the oil drops moves. So you first like kind of let the object or things behave, then you take a creativity from it. You're not gonna make the command. And I was thinking about that a lot in doing projects, because I go back and forth between a kind of quoting of science, but I'm not just imitating it, but I'm letting that flow and see what wrong thing comes out, right? So that's some of the thing I think about when I think about interdisciplinarity. I can show maybe one more. Well, I wonder what I should show. Okay, let me think. I can show maybe another collaboration I did, which is more in the theater. I wanted to make this log that was okay. This is a log I ended up making. I wanted to make a this was in collaboration with a mathematician and another sculptor. I wanted to make a spiral, big time, to experience it. So this is a wooden spiral that rolls. I'm just rolling it. This is not part of the piece. I was rolling it. And then by rolling a huge spiral, I realized the flow pattern of that part that touching the floor makes a really nice spiral, right? So I can put things in there and it won't be smushed. So let's see. Okay. So that I can go in there. So I was being like kind of smushed in the middle of theater when it rolls. And this piece was really about many different things. But I guess I'll just go backwards. This is the spiral. And to make this, I was trying to figure out how to make it. There's so many different ways to make spiral, right? And then a huge one like this, how can I achieve it? So what I end up doing is making, I had a collaborator who has a handmade sawmill. So what I end up is making this jig, these two jig, which by increments moves, and I realized that spiral is like basically the same curving, just if you keep rotating the rod and then you keep doing the same cut, you will get the spiral. So that idea, how can I actually make it happen? So I made this jig that by increment, it rolls, and at the same time move the log forward, right, on the cart. And then there's this is totally the wrong way of doing things. That's great about sculpture. And then I have this saw was mounted on this thing that spins. So it was always the same distance from the core of that log, right? Because the log is not even. So that's how I made it. There's another thing I wanted to make that rotates differently. So this is another jig that shifts and it changes the height. So the log is always going like this and it keeps moving. And then the cut is flat. So what it ends up making is this. And you cannot find the machine that does it because there's no need for it. So I have to make make it, and the reason why I wanted to do this is so that I can reach 10 feet tall, because I was working with this stilt person. She's from the circus, and I wanted to reach the 10 feet like her. So I end up like climbing up that log, and then I reach the same height. And the piece I end up making is called Sunny in the Furnace. It kind of, so conceptually it just kind of started when I heard this song Sunny. I think I was like, I had a breakup or something and I get emotional, and then I heard this song Sunny, that the American song, and it was like, it really hit me. I was listening to it like 10 times in a Greyhound bus, like going back, I've never come to the city again. And then you make me feel 10 feet tall or something, and then the more I find out about the song, it's about his brother who died, and it's not about romance, but so all these things that happen in a crazy life of a singer. And so I wanted to reach the 10 feet tall, so everything was about 10 feet tall. I needed this rod that makes me get into 10 feet. And there was another element, working with the drummer and the sound engineer to create a paper drum that you can play. It's a bit dark, but anyway, the piece, well, the one I wanted to talk about is like how I made that cool object. Here I am again at 10 feet because I was climbing up this chair that made of 3 office chairs connected to each other, so I could reach 10 feet. And I will be talking about what would be, I think in art world, but also in business or in any field, you have to have some kind of disease to be excellent. So you have to be, like successful people are always sick. So what kind of disease should you have? And you have 2 choices. One is charismatic syndrome, and the other is strategic syndrome. And both of them have, symptom and all that thing, but you don't want to, again, like similar to the elasticity talk, that you don't want to reach the death. So when you get the complication on this disease, for example, the charismatic syndrome, when you get a complication, you get to the witchcraft and suicidal cult. So you don't want to get there, but you kind of want to have a bit of a symptom. And strategic disease is, when you get the complication, that's the end of the embarrassing international tourism and end of consumerism. So how would you balance between that? Because I didn't want the Sunny person's brother to die. So a lot of my quest using whatever science or mathematics or art is really about how can I be sick and then not die? Because we're going to be inevitably be sick, right? Like as we age and as we get more deep into your own thing, you'll be a sicko. But how can you be a good one? So that's the kind of drive behind these work. Maybe I can quickly show one more piece and then we can talk about. These are interesting things. Okay. So one more piece that I made recently that maybe I can show is I just want this guy to get smaller. Maybe I did open too many things. This happens. It's called Delicate Cycle, and I was making piece about laundry, I guess. Knew it. Ignore the pot. Okay. this piece was in the Sculpture Center in New York, and they traveled to Shanghai and Japan and places with a different material, local material. It's a sheets that it's like running around, and this is a washboard that you can play, right? In South they play, and I wanted to play it, so I made an instrument that goes on my body. And this is a kind of like a stall, like I kind of imagine a bathroom stall-like place. The museum had very characteristic basement gallery, so I had to make it pretty site-specific. This actually moves, so when I perform like several times over the exhibition to activate it. And there's a narrow corridor that I end up pushing sheets ball. I want to call it like a German sheet ball. But anyway, so it's basically very clean white sheets, but it represents a shit ball that the dung beetle rolls. And then there's some bird that's watching over you, and it has in the bird's eye, the taxidermy bird has a CCTV camera inside, so it's always watching you, and then you can kind of see other people passing through this corridor, as you can see in the monitor. And there was a laundry machine that was running. I hooked it up so that it runs on the 25 cents. So that year I had a pretty low angle number. And one of them I can actually go inside, and then it rotates manually, so I'll be washed, or I'll be rolled, or I'll be the dung beetle. And I can show a bit of what it went on. This seems inside my studio. I would make a mock-up of what I do. The reason why I started this piece was I actually wanted to tilt my body. So I made this human elevator-like box that I can pull from inside and then tilt the whole thing. So I was doing that, not thinking about laundry. That was one of the first thing I wanted to do. And I started to embed magnets inside, so I can establish things that's put vertical, and then when the whole world tilts, the thing's gonna stay, but the world will shift. The axis will shift. So that's what I was trying to achieve there. So this is looks really shitty, and it's all made of the leftover wood. And then afterwards, I end up making another model at the sculpture building around the corner. And I was just trying to figure out how things move. And this is how I make things, because it's very much, it could be engineered, but it's a movement is so specific to my weight and how I move. So I actually have to make a few models to achieve the shape, right? And it's to my body. And then at the same time, when I was thinking about rolling things, like rolling the world, I remembered this Fable's Book of Insect, which I read when I was small. And this is a guy who was actually was a scientist, but they weren't really into study of insects back then. But he was such a good writer, writing about the observation of the dung beetles, that he ended up getting a Nobel Prize in literature, right? So I think and then afterwards, of course, people have like a whole department of studying species. And this drawing of the original book of insects, but also the writing about the dung beetle was so good that I ended up reading, but I also wanted to make my own dung and then roll it, and then being like dung beetle myself. And I started to print it onto different paper because dung beetle is actually a hoarder. Can I hoard? And I like shoes, so I started to collect the shoe boxes and shoe paper that gets inside, looks like a dung, so I actually printed the whole book of insect on a tissue paper inside a shoebox. I couldn't afford the shoes themselves, so I just collected the shoeboxes. But anyway, then around the same time I realized, like, wait a minute, like dung, like shit, you would call it like a dirty things, but it's maybe not a filth for them, it's food for them, right? And then at the same time I was going to the laundromat and I had this like whole huge bundle of things I was carrying. I was like, wow, I should start rolling this. So I started to roll my own laundry to the laundromat, and then I started to question, at what point does laundry become clothes? Like at what point is it dirty? And then when the same objects turn from clean to dirty. So I wanted to again see that moment of different state of objects. So I was really interested in the laundromat all of a sudden, because laundromat is not necessarily clean, oftentimes. And so I started to make friends with them, and I asked them if can I just actually go inside, and I got all these things. And then I wanted to go farther. I actually wanted to rotate, but they refused to rotate this. So I went to this warehouse that they hold the industrial washing machine. It's a bit too dark, but they had like a crazy warehouse with hundreds of washing machines. Some of them, they're trying to remake it or fix it. So there was hundreds of them. So I talked to them, like, can I actually go inside? And like, I made friends with this crazy Russian guy with the laundry business. And so I got this very cheap, and then I started to hack it so that I could actually rotate it in a speed that I don't die. And then next stage was I needed to make a dung myself, because I wanted to be the dung beetle at this point myself. So I made this ball that I can turn into the sheets ball that I can push. Dung beetle pushes thing with their body upside down, so I have to actually like do a lot of push-up that month. And during the performance, I often lecture and then talk about this, in a way, interest from Fable's work, or graph of elasticity, or things about charismatic syndrome that's related. Actually, that the second piece I showed is related to catastrophe theory. So how would you personalize, and can I experience, and can I tell you something using the metaphor of that graph? So I often make non-scientific looking, more like a narrative-based graph during the performance. And every time I do it, since I don't have any script, it comes out a little different. So each performance creates like a new, maybe I go on tangent a lot or things like that. This was like a first 2 months, and then by the time I went to Shanghai or Japan, like the language becomes different and stuff like that. So that's 3 projects, and I don't know what I can tell you, but I thought I'll just show my work and a kind of different interest that's very more about the making problem, and then the head problem, like, because that goes everywhere. And that's amoeba or octopus. Thank you.
Thank you.